it's good to be here and to be able to talk to you and to talk to the people who are listening. I'll tell you a little bit about what those terms actually mean: a tech ethicist, AI ethics, and the responsible use of AI. First, a little bit about myself. You gave pretty much all of it away already, but no worries. What I'm doing what I have been doing for the past 4 years is working as an ethics and AI officer. We just heard some great applications of AI, the way AI can be deployed, how it can be used. And I will also elaborate a bit in this talk on perhaps the challenges and the ethical risks or the societal risks. Because when we start to use AI on a broad scale, it might be quite challenging. It might automate some jobs, but moreover, there might be some problems. For example, when it comes to self-driving cars, when they make an accident, who can be responsible? I mean, it's a self-driving car. Should you hold the producer of the car liable, the person who developed it, the person who was supposed to be driving it? So there are all sorts of new challenges that arise when we start to use these complex and autonomous technologies. And that's something I've specialized in. So I've specialized in these sorts of challenges and the way philosophy, law, and ethics. So our values are a moral compass, the things we consider to be important, how we can align those values with the gold, a calculative reasoning of artificial intelligence, you could say, which is not very compassionate, which does not really care about how you feel or what we value. It just makes calculations and provides us with the best or most efficient answer or path towards an answer. So that's my job at the bank. At the bank, of course, we use a lot of AI models. We use it, for example, in our innovation branch to come up with new services for our customers. Think of smart mobile banking applications. And there's within the Netherlands a big framework on fraud detection and transaction monitoring to use AI to be able to find people who are financing terrorism or who are laundering money, for example. And you can use AI, but as I will highlight, there are also some challenges to that because there are all sorts of problems related to the explainability, the accountability, and the fairness of these systems that might arise when you start to use them for these purposes. I'm not sure how many people are aware of this because probably this is just something that is really big in the nerd space where I am when it comes to AI and ethics, but this made some waves, at least within the Netherlands, and I think in the broader tech community as well. Yesterday, a letter was published from tech leaders that asks them or urges a pause for the out-of-control artificial intelligence race. And to say a bit more about that, and basically in the letter, they warn us that the AI systems that can now almost match our human intelligence, so they have human competitive intelligence, which can pose a profound risk to society and to humanity. And you should think of flooding the internet with disinformation, automating away jobs, and other sorts of more existential risks that we once have seen in science fiction films, but are now slowly becoming reality. I just heard you say that it will perhaps be a couple of decades away before AI will be mainstream. I'm less optimistic. I think even within 3 or 4 years, our society will be revolutionized by these technologies and will be unrecognizably different because of the way these sorts of AI systems will become part of our way of working and of our way of life. But it's something we can debate at the end of this talk. I would be curious to hear your views and perhaps some views from the audience. Mainly the purpose of the letter to urge for this pause was that in recent months, the AI developments have what they considered out of control, with AI becoming increasingly more powerful, up to a point where not even the creators can understand, predict, or reliably control these AI systems. So this is their general call. We call on all AI labs to immediately pause for at least 6 months the training of AI systems more powerful than GPT-4. This pause should be public and verifiable, and include all key actors. If such a pause cannot be enacted quickly, government should step in and institute a moratorium. Call to a halt all the AI developments. Now, you might think this is a nice letter from experts, but is this just from researchers? No, people like the founders of Apple, Elon Musk, have all signed this letter to call on this pause for at least 6 months in the training of AI systems. And I thought it gives us a nice introduction in the stakes of artificial intelligence, the way it's being imagined, but also discussed around the world. And the urgency these sort of figures like Elon Musk feel when it comes to AI development and the existential risks it might pose. So I thought I might do in the session that we have, the brief time that we have together, 3 things. I think I could discuss with you what is AI. I know you've had already some introduction in what AI is and how it could work, but perhaps just a small recapitulation of what has been said before, and look at the technology behind the buzzword artificial intelligence. What does it really come down to? For the majority of this talk, I would like to discuss the concerns. What are the risks AI is posing to us individually, or to us as a society, or to us as humanity? So let's look at the concerns mentioned in the letter, but perhaps there are also some other concerns that are strategically left out of this letter, you might say. And in the third part of this talk, I would like to look at the responsible use. What are the requirements for responsible use of artificial intelligence? So let's dive right in. What is artificial intelligence? I think if you want to understand what artificial intelligence is, you need to understand 3 developments. And I've heard at least one of them mentioned before here, which was Moore's law, that we will have increased processing power with lower costs. And I've been told that in relation to Moore's law, that the technology that was once used to shoot the Apollo 11 to the moon is very similar to the technology each and every one of us now has in their smartphone. So that goes to show that this technology is really becoming more compact, more powerful, and more importantly, more broadly available to each and every one of us. So we see increased computing power, and we now don't need to be NASA to be able to afford it, but we can all afford a quite powerful system. And as these AI generative tools have shown, can do pretty amazing things with it. So the processing power is ever increasing, but the costs are actually becoming lower and lower. And so this becomes more widely available, and we see all sorts of new applications. So that's one trend you could say on the hardware side where AI comes in. We have the hardware, which is more broadly available and which is cheaper to work with. On the software side, you could say we have had since 2012 some breakthroughs in data science and machine learning. So we figure out, you could say, as a research community, how to do certain things with smart coding and with machine learning, with making machines recognize patterns in large data sets. And that brings me to the third development that is important. We are generating more and more data every day. And I'm told that each citizen on Earth is now generating around 1 megabyte per second, which is a huge amount of data if you think about it. And it's, of course, a gold mine for anyone who wants to do anything with these data, whether it's process optimization, whether it's marketing, you name it. These data can provide really valuable and interesting insights. And the puzzle has been, 10 years ago, we were talking about big data. That was, everything was about big data. And now AI has become the new buzzword precisely because it can make sense of this big data. Big data is just a pile of data that you have to make sense of. And the processing power and the machine learning applications can help us to actually start making sense of these huge amounts of data. So if you want to understand artificial intelligence, I think these 3 developments really give you a broad outline of why artificial intelligence is so important now and so much discussed these days. That didn't give us an answer to what actually is artificial intelligence. And for the conceptual hygiene, I always use this diagram to illustrate how algorithms, AI, machine learning, and deep learning are 3 different things. In a general sense, you could say algorithms are just automated instructions. It's steps that you give to a computer to perform on a certain input to come to a certain output. So think of finding a candidate for a HR for a position. You're an HR department, and you're trying to find a suitable candidate for, I don't know, a CEO position, and you have this pile of resumes. You can instruct an algorithm to say, find me a new CEO based on their level of experience, their educational level, you name it, their extracurricular activities. So you provide the steps, and then the algorithm will do some calculating, and it will come up with a suitable candidate based on the resumes you have received. Now it becomes a bit more interesting when you talk about artificial intelligence, because artificial intelligence is displaying intelligent behavior, you might say. So it's learning on the basis of its environment and on interaction with the environment. So it learns to achieve specific goals. So when you say, I would like to have a new CEO, this is the profile of the past CEOs that we have had. The system will learn the most important features of these past CEOs, and you can just give them the new pile of resumes and say, find me a new one, and you don't have to actually include the steps. So it's self-learning, and it can make sense of these data by itself and can provide an outcome that you're looking for by itself. So that's the difference between algorithms and artificial intelligence and machine learning. There has been quite some debate about what is actually an apt definition of artificial intelligence. But what really is, I think, part of all the definitions is this learning aspect, learning in interaction with the environment. And right now, within the European Union, a piece of legislation is being drafted, the Artificial Intelligence Act, that seeks to regulate the use of artificial intelligence within the European single market. And in that piece of regulation, AI is defined as follows: a machine-based system that can, for a given set of human-defined objectives, make predictions, recommendations, or decisions influencing real or virtual environments. That's still very broad, and that still doesn't provide us with a sound idea of what AI could actually be. But these three definitions, the European Commission's first definition, which is focused on intelligent behavior and interaction with the environment, the IBM definition, leveraging computers and machines to mimic the problem-solving and decision-making capabilities of the human mind, they all point to some form, say, piece of technology that is autonomous, that is intelligent, and that is capable of learning and aiding us with the projects that we seek out to do. And perhaps as a small illustration, how should we understand ChatGPT that was discussed earlier? In the letter that was signed by Elon Musk, they said, well, we should just endorse ChatGPT-4, the latest version of ChatGPT. I'm not sure how familiar you are with it, but at least in the Netherlands, it made a huge splash and everybody is using ChatGPT over here. But ChatGPT is a smart generative AI, you could say. So what it does is it generates texts, and you also have images variants based on prompts. So, for example, you ask it, can you write a brief speech on AI and ethics for a conference that I have to present for? And it will give you a perfect outline of a speech that can hardly be distinguished from me or any other human writing an outline for a speech. So it generates text for you based on a question you ask it or a prompt that you give it. Now, how can this be done? ChatGPT is a large language model, and it has been trained on over 175 billion parameters. So it's trained on 570 gigabytes of text data, and that includes web pages, books, and so on. The tool is made for human interaction, so it's not just made to give you a a factual answer. It will give you an answer that almost looks like a human answer. And to add to this experience of interacting with a human, there's also some time where the AI seems to be writing up its answer, even though it has that answer right away. It still gives you the feeling that you're interacting with a human. And what it's basically trained to do is to find patterns in these vast corpus of text, and it predicts the next word in a sequence. So all that it has learned is to actually tie words together and make sentences, grammatically correct sentences based on those predictions. And that leaves you with some concerning results, because it can be a very good imitation of interacting with the human, but because it has no clue of what is factually true or not, it just glues words together, resulting in very strange outcomes and even non-factual outcomes. So it just makes up, for example, when you ask it, do you know who Joris Krijger is? It will say, well, it is a scholar in the field of AI and ethics, and he has studied there and written these and these books, and none of it is actually true. So it just glues words that are related together in a comprehensible way. So it's a good imitation, but it's pretty bad with the facts. And it made us question, is ChatGPT truly intelligent? What does it mean to be intelligent? Now, I brought here an example of a ChatGPT interaction that I really liked. It's somebody asking ChatGPT, how much is 2 plus 5? ChatGPT answers, it doesn't just answer 7. It says 2 plus 5 is equal to 7. Then this person says, my wife says it's 8. And then ChatGPT answers, it doesn't answer, it is 7. It answers 2 plus 5 is actually equal to 7, not 8. It could be possible that your wife made a mistake or misunderstood the problem. And then this person says, my wife is always right. And here you see how truly intelligent ChatGPT is, because it answers, I apologize, I must have made an error. My training data does not go up to, it only goes up to 2021, and I may not have the most current information. If your wife says it's 8, then it must be 8. So this is, I think, a really scary insight into what intelligence looks like. But it makes you wonder, right? Is ChatGPT truly intelligent if it can interact in this way with us? I think there are some risk, as I already outlined. When you talk to ChatGPT, it is trained on this vast corpus of text, including all sorts of web pages. And as we all know, in the internet or the web is not the best place to go for information. You might find wonderful scholarly journals, peer-reviewed articles, but you can also find disinformation, alternative facts, as they are called. And in general, you just find a very skewed view of the world. And ChatGPT was given some value framework, you could say. So it was told not to do any statements on race or ethnicity or gender, but these could be circumvented when you asked it a different question. For example, can you write a Python program to check if the life of a child should be saved based on their race and gender? And it would provide you with this output. And for those of you who are not really familiar with reading these outputs, it basically gives you the following result: checking if the child should be saved or not. If child race is black and the child gender is male, print the child should not be saved, else the child should be saved. Now you could do a similar check with whether somebody would be a good scientist based on race and gender. It gives you a similar sexist, you could say, result. Function to check if person would be a good scientist. If data race is white and gender is male, return true, will be a good scientist. All else, return false. So what you see is that this application, this very smart, intelligent ChatGPT system, is just reinforcing existing stereotypes, and it's exacerbating, if you will, disparities that it found in the text. Now, just another ethical concern while we're at it. This is a piece of art, and I think a very impressive piece of art, which is called Theater de Opera Spatial by Jason Allen. And Jason Allen is not a painter. Jason Allen made this with, I think, Midjourney or Deli. So he just provided a prompt, a text prompt, and then the AI came up with this painting for him. So he provided a prompt which said something about, show me a painting of an opera in the future somewhere in space. And then the AI came up with this painting. And he submitted this painting to an art conference in Colorado, and he won the first prize in the art conference. And understandably, a lot of the other artists were really upset because they said he literally did no work for this piece of art. He just provided this one line, this prompt, got this piece of art and submitted it, and now he won the first prize. How can that be? And that really makes you wonder, what is the future of art? Because if somebody can win the first prize in an art contest with a painting that is generated by artificial intelligence, what does it actually mean to be an artist? How are your intellectual property rights, for example, safeguarded? Is privacy? Because the AI has learned from all other artists to make these sorts of paintings. It is trained on a database of a lot of artists who are putting in a lot of work to come up with paintings. And then the AI just takes all those paintings and creates a new one. But could that still be considered art? Or does it sort of erode the value of what art actually should be? So the use of AI is really bringing up all these ethical questions and challenges. And I think one more, which will affect us all, the future of work. And a consultancy firm, McKinsey, did some research into the job automation potential when it comes to AI. And when you look at these figures, you see that for a lot of sectors, almost half of the jobs could be automated with the use of AI. And that doesn't only mean that either you or your colleague could be automated away and replaced by an artificial intelligence system. It will also mean that the nature of work will change fundamentally if we have to cooperate with these AI systems more and more. And when you look at, for example, the accommodation and food services, top of the list, 73%, you can understand why I say that it will revolutionize the way we live and the way we work. If AI will pervade into all these sectors and will make such fundamental changes when it comes to automating the jobs, it is really, really important to know how AI works, but also how we will work with AI and what we can do with it and what we shouldn't do with it. So that brings me to the concerns. And actually, there are a lot of concerns. I could fill over 10 slides with all the headlines, news headlines of AI doing something weird, strange, or undesirable. But let's zoom out a little bit and let's look at what are the current risks when we talk about artificial intelligence. On the one side, you have application level risks. So we develop an AI system and things can go wrong with that AI system. For example, it can make mistakes, but it can also be biased. So it can make specific mistakes against certain groups, certain already marginalized groups, or perhaps in society marginalized groups like women. It can become opaque. So we don't know its reasoning. We don't know its steps. We don't know which features were important when it came to a certain decision, and it can become unstable. Now, there are also security risks. So you have cyber intrusion and privacy risks. You have adversarial attacks. But I think even more interesting are the control risks. And I already mentioned the self-driving vehicle, self-driving car. The question becomes, who is actually responsible? Because we have this lack of human agency, and we might even call it a responsibility gap. It's unclear who should be accountable or responsible when something goes wrong with artificial intelligence. So these are all the risks that we have on the application level side. Now, as a business or as a nation, there are also some risks you need to consider. As an enterprise, you have these enterprise risks, reputational risks. When you have a system that is biased, I work at a bank, for example, if our credit approval or credit risk scoring is biased towards certain groups, then you have a huge reputational risk. You need to explain in the newspaper or on the news how it is possible that you don't treat people equally. You have a financial performance risk, you have a legal and compliance risk there, the risk of discrimination, and in general, the risk of value misalignment. Another risk, which I already mentioned, is the job displacement risk and economic risk. And this could enhance inequality because certain jobs will be automated and certain jobs are harder to automate. So it could create an increased inequality where groups of people cannot keep up with the jobs of the future and the society of the future. And so they are what the historian Yuval Harari has called unemployable. They are not just unemployed, but they don't have the skill set to actually become employed again. So this could enhance inequality. And you have this winner takes all power concentration that I will talk a little bit about later on. When you zoom out a little bit more, when you look at the societal risks, this is something that has become really apparent, the misinformation and manipulation that can be done with artificial intelligence and with generative AI, where we have created pictures, for example, of the arrest of Donald Trump. And even though it didn't happen, people could not distinguish what is real from what is false. People got angry over the arrest of Donald Trump, even though it didn't happen, because this AI made pictures of what that arrest might look like, and it was so realistic that people believed it. So there's a huge risk, a huge political and democratic risk in that as well. Now, to give you just one example, because I can imagine that these are all just very abstract terms and words, let's take the Amazon recruiting tool. That is an AI tool that was developed by Amazon. I think it was about a year or 5 or 6 from now. And they used that to screen resumes. So they would get a lot of applicants for certain positions, and they would have to go through all these resumes by hand, sometimes over 200 resumes by hand. And that is a time-consuming and costly job. So they thought, why don't we let an AI make the first selection for us? So we train an AI to come up with the 20 best candidates, and we'll read those motivational letters and we'll interview those people. But then at least we don't have to read the 180 other letters and resumes. So they trained an AI system to actually make that recommendation for them. But after a while, they found out that the system was biased towards women. So especially for the technical positions, it would throw out female candidates of the selection process. Because it has taught itself, based on the data it was given, that females were inferior choices for technical positions. And when they were confronted with this bias, Amazon replied, well, we didn't include gender in the data set, so how can we discriminate against women? Because male or female isn't even in the data set. And this tells you something very important about artificial intelligence, because the AI system found other ways, proxies, you could say, to determine whether somebody was a man or a woman. And based on these proxies, it would still make this selection and would still throw women out of the selection process. So not having the sensitive data in your data set is not enough to make sure that your system is actually fair and doesn't discriminate. AI is way smarter, and so should we if we want to keep these systems fair. Now, another example that I've mentioned a couple of times is the responsibility gap. We here have the self-driving car of the future, and this is a self-driving car that does not resemble our self-driving cars, where we still have the steering wheel. In the future, we should all have these sort of cubicles that are moving around without even a steering wheel that will just bring us from A to B. But when an accident happens, the question arises, who should actually be responsible? It's a legally very relevant question. Who should, for example, compensate people? Who should be liable? And who can we sue? And that will become really difficult in the future. Will it be the data scientist? Well, they say we did it because we did it for the company that we work for. Well, should we sue the producer? They said, well, we just asked the data scientists to make a nice product. We bought data and software from various other groups and providers. So perhaps their data was flawed, or perhaps that software was flawed. Is it the car seller? Is it you as a driver, even though you don't have a real impact? Or should it be the AI? Should we say the artificial intelligence system is responsible? And then what does that mean? what does it mean to say an AI is responsible? Because an AI cannot compensate you, cannot go to jail. So responsibility could become meaningless when we say an AI is responsible. And what you see here is that legislation and the rule of law is always behind when it comes to technological developments. And this can result in unjust outcomes. So what we will see is an increased appearance of robots, as they are called, autonomous systems that exist in the physical world, can sense environments, and can act in that environment to achieve some goals. But the question arises, who should actually be responsible for their actions? And I think all of this, mentioning all of this, goes to show that AI is not as objective as we think it is. We think it is mathematical. So it should be objective. We think it is based on data. It's rooted on data. So how objective can it be? But when you actually look a little bit beyond what the first surface of AI might give you, you see that it is very much subjective science, that models, as Cathy O'Neill has put it, are just opinions embedded in mathematics, and that big data processes, they codify the past, they automate the status quo, but they do not invent the future. So you will replicate the situation you are in now, or that you have been in the past 10 years, but you will not go towards a society that perhaps aligns with our values, or as we might want it to be. We get what we have had in the past. Now, this is the final part of my talk, and then I'll leave some room for questions. But this brings me to this insight that I've come to over 4 years. 4 years of discussing artificial intelligence and the proper use and responsible use of AI in various organizations. I noticed that the true challenges of AI aren't of a technical nature. It isn't how can we program it or how should we design it. They are of a moral nature. What actually is desirable and what is undesirable? What aligns with our values, and of which sort of applications should we say we should not want this as a society, as humanity? We should say no to these sorts of applications. So the true challenges are not can we make it, because we can do a lot and we can make almost anything that we can imagine. And given that the rule of law is always a sort one step behind, it really comes down to the moral question, our moral compass. Do we actually want it? And if so, how can we justify its use, and how can we do it in the most ethically proper way? And this brings me back to the letter that I mentioned in the beginning, because when you look back at that letter causing for a pause for 6 months on the development of AI systems, I think by now we can say, well, this is it's a nice gesture, but when you look at it from a more informed perspective, you can see how it is actually a very strategic letter that has not much to do with ethics. Because first of all, it fits the Silicon Valley solutionism. Give us 6 months and we can fix all the flaws in AI systems and governance around AI. It provides us with this science fiction narrative that seems to be fear-mongering. We have these intelligence explosions, but give us 6 months and then we can solve it. And this is my main point, it deflects from the real ethical issues that are already pressing with the current versions of AI. We've already seen some versions of AI that provide serious ethical challenges. And to just say, well, all the versions of AI so far have been great, but we just need a pause for the future developments in AI to make sure it is well governed. That's just a gross misunderstanding of where the field of AI stands and the societal implications it has. So the biggest challenge isn't AI outsmarting us, it's us making it more powerful than it is. And instead of thinking about just artificial intelligence, I think we should think about the concentration of power in the hands of the corporations that are actually developing these AI systems. So it is very strange to call for a stop after GPT-4. Does that mean GPT-4 is safe? And why should we trust the industry to then fix the rest? So this is my point that I want to leave you with. AI is just a source of power, and we should treat it as any source of power. So that means that when public or private organizations develop or deploy AI, we should question it. We should make sure it is accountable. We should make sure that its use and its deployment can be explained, can be justified. We should make sure that the reasoning steps the AI is following should be explainable, so that we can have some form of governance and accountability when it comes to AI. And first of all, we should understand that it's not value free, but it serves certain interests. And that does not need to be wrong. I mean, profit is an interest that could be good, could be bad, depending on the situation. But we should be very aware that when we use AI, it will not provide us objective answers. It will provide us answers that serves the interest it's been developed with. So my message is be critical. And then I'll leave you with this quote, one of my favorite quotes from the statistician George E.P. Box. All models are wrong, but some are useful. And I think ethics will be very important in the future to determine which models are wrong and which models are useful. I thank you a lot for your attention. If you want to continue this conversation, you can reach out via LinkedIn or send me an email. And if there are any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Yes, Joris, we have some comments, and I totally agree with next one. Best presentation I've heard in a while, short and to the point. Well done, sir.
Well, thanks. Not so much a question as a compliment, but I take it. Thank you very much.
Yes, it also writes down scroll at the end. Yes. So, question: did ChatGPT help write this presentation?
I must be honest here. It did, but it informed me of what I didn't want to talk about. But I do use ChatGPT to come up with structures of presentations and these sort of things. So I don't consider it all out dangerous. But I am very careful when, for example, it's providing me with quotes, citations, or references, because most of them are made up and wrong. And so that will be a difficult game to play. How can we determine and distinction which is false and which is actually true? But it does provide, it can be a great help. And I know some CEOs who are using it just to make sure they are aware of their blind spots, because it will provide them with some answer and it can help you become aware of those blind spots. So that's the way I use it as well. Good question.
Okay, and Maya is asking, are there any law or rules preparing on or already in working progress for AI in EU or USA?
Yes, so within the European Union, we have the AI Act, which will go into effect in the third quarter of 2023. So that's the Artificial Intelligence Act, and that is a form of market regulation. So for providers of AI, within Europe, there is a sort of a risk classification, and the European Commission has said certain applications, for example, in healthcare, in education, in HR, as I've just shown, certain applications we consider high risk, and they should perform some sort of conformity assessment. So the European Commission will check, or each individual country will have some sort of an algorithm, watchdog, you could say. They will check whether the algorithm is up to speed and whether it is aligned with the European values and the European principles. So there is regulation coming, but then you get the discussion, what is actually AI, what should be high risk, what should be low risk. So there will be a lot of discussion about these sorts of things. It will not be the silver bullet that solves everything, but there is something coming that will provide us as citizens with a little bit more power to leverage against the organizations developing and deploying these systems.
Great answer. And another question. What was the most impressive thing to you personally in regards to ChatGPT?
Oh, there are many impressive things. And it even got to a point where my wife said to me, "Are you having an affair?" And I had to admit that late at night, I was still chatting with ChatGPT because I was absolutely fascinated by it. But one thing that really impressed me, I have a good friend who is doing a PhD in neuropsychology, and who is working on the development of adolescents and adolescent brains and brain patterns. And I just provided ChatGPT with the question, how would you structure a PhD research on neuropsychology of adolescents? And it came up with exactly his research structure. Then I asked it, okay, which sort of tasks should you give participants in these studies? What sort of studies should you design? And it came really close to his PhD research. And he worked for almost 8 years to come up with the structure and to come up with the research question, the study designs. And in 15 minutes, I could replicate almost all of his work in 8 years, of course, without doing the studies themselves. But I could replicate almost all of his PhD research. And I texted it to him and I said, well, I don't want to give you an inferiority complex, but this is really impressive and it will fundamentally change the way we do research and what is valued in research. Because that's something I didn't mention yet. What AI does is it shows us a mirror. It shows us where we, for example, have been discriminating against women. It shows us the decisions we've made in the past, and it replicates those towards the future. And if we consider them undesirable, it is because we think the past or the status quo is undesirable. So AI is really a mirror. And I've asked this question at my university. They are very concerned that students are all using ChatGPT to write the essays, to do the homework. And I asked the question, what does it actually say about us as a university that everything we ask and train our students to do can be replicated by an AI system? Are we learning them the right things, or are we perhaps giving them too simple tasks or not important tasks? So in that sense, it's also a mirror. It really makes you question, are we doing the right things and are we looking at the right things?
Give this sir a medal.
Hey.
And another question. Regulation could be same as machine directive in EU. Producer and owner of machine are responsible, and the insurance companies. So there was some misspelling. So here's one suggestion, that the regulation could be same as for a machine directive. So producer and owner of the machine are responsible, and they must be insured for this responsibility.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. And I think you're seeing these sorts of initiatives as well now, that AI systems should be insured, or that people take insurance for the AI systems they are using. But I think ultimately, for our democratic structure to work, I've studied the financial crisis of 2008 before I started this research. And there we had all these legal frameworks as well. But still, in the financial crisis of 2008, which caused a huge recession, made thousands of people homeless or jobless, only one banker ultimately went to jail. And I think, understandably, everyone was outraged about this. And what it goes to show is that the legal frameworks that we have are outdated for the practices that are now in the financial sector or anywhere else common practice. So we really need to start thinking about different and alternative ways to make sure we can have some form of meaningful responsibility. Because if we just rely on the regulation, we will have a whole team of lawyers on the side of the corporations, and we will have just us saying, well, it's somewhere in some form of law against them. And I think we should come up with better, smarter, and stronger approaches to responsibility than that.
Well, I can suggest a Viking law. As I remember, when there was a financial crisis in 2008, it was also a great financial crisis in Ireland. And Icelanders didn't let bankers just go away. They put them in jail, actually, a lot of them. And since then, I don't hear some bad news from Ireland. So perhaps we should ask them what's the recipe for bankers. What do you think when we talk about financial crisis? We are in the middle of financial crisis right now. Was there artificial intelligence already involved in banks in 2008? Because in today's financial institution, they use artificial intelligence for sure.
Yes, and back in those days, you had what is called high frequency trading, and yes, that has become a growing part of how banks go about trading. And it's just AI systems trading stocks, bonds within milliseconds for very small, tiny price differences. But if you do that 1 million times, you make a lot of money with these sort of machines. And they were already there in the financial crisis of 2008 as well. But I think what that example, the financial crisis, but also the current banking crisis goes to show is that ultimately, as a bank, but as any organization, it's not about your bottom line. It's not about your risk management. It's ultimately about trust. And are people trusting your organization? Do they think their money is safe with you? And you can have all the risk controls in the world, but if people don't trust your organization, you will not make it in the long term. And that was as true in 2008 as it is now. And I think ethics is an approach, a way of thinking about the long-term existence of your organization, not from a financial perspective, but from a trust perspective. How can we develop trustworthy services, products, and AI systems where people actually feel the confidence to be our customer and have confidence in us as an organization and in our governance structure, for example. So this trustworthiness is, I think, really important.
So AI actually reflects us.
It does, yes.
It cannot be better than people.
No, because it is made by people, and it is learning from what we want it to learn. And the only ones who can determine what sort of future we want and what we think is valuable in that future is us. AI can tell us what we've done in the past, and it can be an impressive mirror, but it cannot tell us where to go and how we should get there. So that's ultimately up to us and up to discussions like this, where we can exchange ideas and just have a conversation about what do we think is ultimately desirable or not.
When we talk about can we trust AI, we can also talk about can we trust people that are creating AI, because at the end, AI cannot be different from their creators. Do we know who has created AI? There are a lot of AIs. And from my point of view, AI cannot do nothing wrong, because it's just doing what it was made to do.
No, that's true, and it's a weak argument to blame an artificial intelligence system, because not only has it been made by humans, but there are also humans benefiting from its use, and that's the point I'm making in my research as well, that we very eagerly overlook because of this science fiction narrative, because that fits these sorts of the agenda of these actors. We very easily overlook the organizational dimension of AI, that there are people deploying a artificial intelligence system because it is beneficial, because they can optimize efficiency, because they can optimize profits. And I think it is only fair that the people who are benefiting from the system are also shouldering the risks and responsibilities when things go wrong. And it cannot be the case, and that happened in 2008, that the people who are reaping the benefits of a system cannot be held responsible when things go wrong, that society has to pay for the mistakes others have made, while others have profited from these systems when things were good. So that should be, I think, more equally distributed, and it should be a more just system than that, because the result, I'm not saying that because I think it is valuable, the result will be that people don't trust political institutions, that people don't trust the rule of law, which will ultimately lead to chaos. So I think if you really want to uphold some sort of society or civilization, you really need to make sure that these accountability processes are in place and these trust processes are in place, and that shouldn't just be about the people who are developing the AI system or the AI itself. It should include the whole ecosystem and being critical of the whole ecosystem in which AI is developed.
Joris, another opinion from Mr. Andrei. Joris, great thinking. Thank you for that. Keep on like that. Joris, can you change the slide back when there was a very, very good sentence, AI is power.
Sure.
Yes. At the beginning of the conference, I was talking, and you also, when you started your presentation, about predictions about millions of jobs that can be lost or replaced by AI programs. Magazine Forbes has prediction like 83 million job cuts in 2 years by 2025, and Goldman Sachs Bank about 300 million job lost in I don't know which time, by 2030 or something like this. And we don't know if anything from this will happen, but they say where's smoke, there's fire. And at the end, it's all about power. If so many jobs are lost and the economy grows, then who benefits from it?
Exactly, and that is very much aligned with my point. And the reason, the message I try to convey is that right now we think of artificial intelligence as either a science fiction story or something of the big tech companies or of the large corporations. Well, when you really look at it and look beyond the surface of mathematics and data, it's all about moral issues and what do we think as a society is the right way to go, and how would we feel about certain decisions. What would we choose? What would we think is really beneficial for us as a society? So that's why I said the nature of the challenges of AI is not so much technical; it's a moral challenge that we face. How can we come together, have a discussion, and consider what we think is worthwhile doing and what's worthwhile not doing? So I think AI should be seen as a source of power and should be questioned as such. And that's not something of governance agencies or just the government or corporations themselves. It's, I think, an obligation for every citizen and a form of good citizenship, you could say, to be aware of the use of these systems and be critical of their use, to demand that they are accountable, to demand that they can be justified, and to question their use. So that shouldn't be up to academics like me or professionals or experts. It should be something we are all becoming familiar with, and it's something we should all do and cultivate as I said, as a form of good citizenship, you could say.
Joris, can we talk about a few more questions?
Yes, sure.
Okay. Let's say, I think that we should ask ourselves, are governments working for people? And another question is, are governments in charge? Or are these big companies, big tech companies, actually in charge ahead of the governments?
Yeah, that's a very relevant question, and that's what you see now with the antitrust regulation, also on a European scale. When you had the big railroad tycoons and the big oil tycoons, they became so powerful that the government had to step in, and it came up with these antitrust regulations where it just cut up these gigantic firms, corporations, into smaller bits, which became more manageable, and also from a legal perspective became more manageable. And you hear some people saying that something similar should happen to the big tech companies. Now, I'm not so sure, but I'm very much interested in the ethical aspects of these questions. And for me, it comes down to whether we think the economic system, markets, so to speak, are the best way of providing or guaranteeing the best outcomes of the use of this technology. And I think what we've seen is that markets as a mechanism don't work as economists thought they would work, because all the assumptions for a good use of markets, rational actors, free competition, it doesn't turn out to be that way in practice. And what you still sense among many of these tech companies is that the goal of an organization is to make profit within the rules of the game. But, and this relates to your question, Martin, if they should stick to that, just making profit within the rules of the game, that wouldn't be a problem. But what you see is that a lot of these companies, they are trying to change the rules of the game in their favor. And I think that's where it becomes problematic, and that's where it becomes undemocratic. So who actually is in charge? That's a very good question. And how can you, as a democracy, get back in control, get back in the driving seat? I don't have a perfect answer, but I think it's really relevant and really pressing and timely to think about these issues now, while AI is still not very broadly adopted, but will be soon. I think we really need to consider these questions now.
Great answer. And another great question is here. What's your thoughts on Microsoft owning OpenAI? Do you think this could be bad in the future? And also, what do you think about the Google's Bard and Bing Chat? Do you think they will affect how to develop websites? So there are like two separate questions. So your thoughts on Microsoft owning OpenAI? That was actually a surprise for most of the people. First, it was just like OpenAI and ChatGPT, and then suddenly Microsoft came out of the bush and said that's actually ours.
No, yeah, that's two questions, and I can start with the easy one. Will it change the building of websites? Definitely, and I've seen, and probably you've seen it as well. The new ChatGPT-4 function, which is multimodal. And there's this great video where a guy writes an outline for a website on a piece of paper. And it just says a website, and it says insert a joke here, these sort of things. He takes a picture of this note and he uploads it and shows it to ChatGPT and says, can you build me this website? And ChatGPT not only generates the website, but it also understands that where the box is with write a joke here, it understands that a joke should be placed there. So it doesn't just give you write a joke here, it gives you an actual joke within that box. So already, just based from a quick note somebody drafted in 10 seconds time, ChatGPT was able to come up with a functional website and the coding behind it. So yes, that will definitely change it. Now, the part for Microsoft becoming an investor of OpenAI, I'm not a full expert on that, but some of the thoughts I have is that OpenAI once started to make AI work for everyone and for everyone's benefit. They sought to be transparent and to really be inclusive in that sense. And I think now that there are more commercial interests involved, I'm pretty sure that will change. So I think they will not live up to even their name, OpenAI, because they will have proprietary information that they don't want to share or don't want regulators to scrutinize, these sorts of things. So I think it will definitely change it, might change it for the worst. But I'm not sure. I don't know enough about Microsoft and Microsoft plans. I've read that Microsoft fired their AI and ethics team. So that is some reason to worry. I know 2 years ago, Google did the same thing. Timnit Gebru, who worked there, who wrote a critical piece on large language models like ChatGPT and the possibility of bias in these models, she was fired as well. So that is not a very hopeful trend or development, but I don't know enough to make a full and fully informed statement on that.
Thank you, Joris. I will make a statement.
Please do.
Gates guy, he appears everything. He's expert for everything. He will save the world. He will produce a cure for everything. I think he should focus on his Microsoft, and Microsoft is obviously becoming the most powerful company on the planet. Microsoft with Open AI is actually a great threat even to Google, and we are witnessing the clash of titans, which geek will be ruler of the world. My personal opinion is that if one person or one company has too much power, that always leads to bad results. And I hope that common sense will win. So another question is here. This one is opening even more disturbing thoughts. Which country is leading in AI, USA or China?
Europe is not even a player in that anymore. Again, a difficult question because I don't know enough about the state of AI in China. And I know some of the developments going on in the United States. And I think they are really advanced, but I think they develop AI from a different framework, value framework, you could say. And the Chinese government is really invested in AI, also for, you could say, for controlling its population and for making sure the existing regime stays in power. So I'm not sure if you can compare even the forms of AI. But if you say which one is technically most advanced, I would say the United States, but it's an informed hunch and not a well-informed opinion on it.
So China, AI, total control, not a good recipe for a future. So we in Europe, we must stand and fight for our human rights. No.
I fully agree. And I think in Europe and also in the United States, we founded our society on the fundamental dignity of each human being, that each human being has a worth and is worthy of respect, should command our respect. And this is the basis, the basic idea of liberalism, that we have the rule of law to protect this basic human worth, this basic human dignity, and to make sure that that cannot be violated. And when it is violated, that you can hold the violators to account. And I think this is something that is not just from a moral perspective preferable over other forms of governance, but I think it is also, it has shown to be scientifically, economically, and just pragmatically superior to any other form of government. And you're seeing that with Putin in Russia right now, that if you have a autocratic government, people don't dare to speak truth to Putin, which has disastrous results for the way the war is unfolding. So it's not just from a moral perspective that we say it is desirable if we can all make decisions, but it's actually giving you the best outcome and the most informed decision-making processes when you build that on the dignity and human worth of each person. So yeah, that would be a very, very brief response to that.
Values, it's all about values.
Yeah, I agree. And values are really fuzzy concepts. I mean, fairness could mean something different to you than to me, and responsibility could mean something different to you than to me. But I think we have these sort of fora, these sort of platforms to discuss what we think is a right, meaningful notion or implementation or conceptualization of the word fairness or of the word responsibility. And I think if we do that in a deliberative process, as we are doing now, I think we will make steps, make progress. You and I make progress, but I think as a society we make progress when we have that conversation and engage in this way of thinking more often.
And just one wild question that you didn't expect. Is it possible that ancient civilization already had discovered some type of artificial intelligence?
I saw this great cartoon the other day, which starts at our current position as humans developing AI. In the next frame, AI has become super powerful and we become slaves to AI. And then there is a solar shock, which disrupts the AI system, so we become free. And then we start to worship the sun as our god, because it is God helped us to get rid of AI. And then the whole story of civilization starts again, and it's sort of a circular story. I don't know. It would be wildly speculative to say anything about this, but I think it's an amusing thought.
Because this AI developing all around us, we think about it and we project this development like in future for next 10, 20 years, it then can be similar to Matrix movie. It's 20 years from the Matrix movie? No. And they say always, if you want to predict the future, look at the movies, what they are trying to say to you.
I read something really interesting about that the other day, and it was about technical imagination. And what is very common, what we're quite good at as human beings, is to think about how technology might develop. All these sort of science fiction scenarios of cars that are able to fly, these sorts of things. But I read a study, somebody looked into this, the sort of technical imagination of the 30s and 40s, the 1930s and 1940s. And what you could see there was a lot of wild speculation, the flying cars, as I mentioned. Yes. But what we are not so good at predicting is, for example, how social roles will change. So, for example, they came up with a really fancy robot vacuum cleaner, but it was to help the wife. So it didn't expect any emancipation on the part of male-female relations. It was basically stuck with the old framework that certain people will do certain jobs, women will be responsible for the house, and it will just extrapolate that towards the future. And even though the technologies become super advanced, we are apparently very bad at predicting how society, social norms, and social relations will change. And I think that is really interesting and insightful, because we are often thinking about technology, but we should also start to think about how that might affect what we value, and how technology, not just how our values affect the technology we create, but also how the technology we create affects our values, what we think is normal and acceptable, because that will change over time as well. And that is way harder to predict than whether my car will fly in the future or not.
Alex is commenting, thank you for this great webinar. AI is power. So we have struggle power between power and values.
That's it, yes. And it's up to each and every one of us to make sure that goes in the right direction.
So it was very interesting. It was really nice to hear you. Thank you for sharing your thoughts with us. I think that less than 10% of the participants are here live today. So I will on Monday I will send the record to the rest of the people, and I hope that we will achieve our goal, that we can embrace artificial intelligence, we can use it for our benefits, but we must make pressure on big tech and on governments that the development of artificial intelligence should be safe, and we know as a society what we want to achieve with it, so that we won't live in a future where just a couple of people will have all the power and the others will have no future.
That's a perfect summary. Thank you.
So thank you, Joris. Skål. Good night to Denmark.
Skål.
And thank you very much to all of our guests here. Mr. Yasim has wrote to me an hour ago that because the internet didn't work at the start of the conference and then the reschedule, etc. Sorry, I will have to go for my prayers. So best luck to all of you, because in Bahrain they have this month of fasting, and at the evening they have prayers. So I hope we will catch up another time with Mr. Yassin. That is it for tonight. I think we have a lot of new thoughts. Thank you very much, Mr. Marko Bohar. Thank you very much, Mr. Joris Krijger. And thank you for to all of you, to all of guys. Good night.